There was a time when certain food brands felt untouchable. The pantry staples, the frozen favorites, the household names that survived recessions, wars, and every generational shift. But 2026 is rewriting the rules. Americans aren't just shopping differently, they're abandoning entire brands they once trusted. Prices climbed, quality dropped, portions shrank, ingredients changed, and loyalty, the thing these companies counted on, evaporated almost overnight. Walk down a grocery aisle today and the truth hits you. Iconic brands are sitting untouched, while store brands and bargain alternatives fly off the shelves. The consumer collapse isn't theoretical anymore. It's sitting right there between the cereal and the frozen dinners, gathering dust. Here are the top 5 food brands Americans are stopping buying, not because they want to, but because the economy left them no choice. 1. Kellogg's, the cereal giant no one can justify anymore. Walk down the cereal aisle in 2026, and it feels like stepping into a quiet museum exhibit dedicated to a vanished American ritual. The bright boxes are still there. Tony the Tiger grinning, Toucan Sam pointing the way, Snap, Crackle, and Pop frozen mid-pose. But the shelves don't move the way they used to. Boxes sit untouched. Price tags glare like warnings. The cereal aisle, once the loudest, most colorful section of the store, now feels like a graveyard of childhood breakfasts. Kellogg's didn't collapse overnight. It priced itself out of relevance one box at a time. For decades, cereal was the affordable American breakfast. Quick, easy, cheap, a staple for families, and a lifeline for anyone trying to stretch a budget. But in 2026, a single box of Kellogg's cereal can cost as much as a full meal, sometimes $10, $12, even $15 in certain markets. That's not breakfast, that's luxury. And when a box of Frosted Flakes costs more than a dozen eggs and a loaf of bread combined, people don't stay loyal, they walk away. The reasons behind the collapse read like a checklist of corporate self-destruction. Prices went up, portions went down, ingredients got cheaper, taste got worse. Shrinkflation hit cereal harder than almost any other aisle. Boxes stayed the same height but grew thinner. Bags inside rattled with more air than food. Consumers noticed. They felt betrayed, and the marketing couldn't keep up. No cartoon tiger can convince a parent to spend half their grocery budget on sugar-coated corn. No nostalgic jingle can make a teenager choose cereal over eggs, oatmeal, or discount breakfast burritos. No amount of heart-healthy claims can justify the cost when a gallon of milk already feels like an impulse purchase. Meanwhile, America's eating habits shifted under Kellogg's feet. People cook at home more. Kids don't grow up with big breakfasts anymore. Younger generations don't even consider cereal a serious food. Protein is king, sugar is the villain. And cereal, Kellogg's cereal especially, sits on the wrong side of every trend. Behind the scenes, Kellogg's corporate structure fractured too. The cereal division split into its own company, a desperate attempt to fix years of stagnation. But the split didn't solve anything. It only shined a spotlight on how weak the cereal business has become in a country where groceries eat more paycheck than rent. There's a quiet tragedy to it. Families who grew up on these brands now walk past them with a kind of guilty nostalgia. Parents pick up the box, look at the price, shake their head, and put it back. Cereal didn't stop being a comfort food. It just stopped being affordable. Cereal was never meant to be a luxury item, but Kellogg's turned it into one. And now Americans simply don't buy it. The aisle hasn't changed its colors or layout, but the culture around it shifted completely. The cereal giants still stand tall on the shelf, but the customers are gone. Kellogg's will blame inflation, supply chains, shifting diets. But the truth is simpler. When a breakfast food becomes a financial decision, the brand has already lost. Next, Tyson, the meat empire, Americans no longer trust, no matter how big its footprint once was. 2. Tyson, the meat empire, Americans no longer trust. Walk past the refrigerated meat section in 2026, and you can spot Tyson's decline without even trying. The brand is still everywhere. The chicken breasts stacked in foam trays, the frozen nuggets in oversized bags, the processed patties lined up like factory-made promises. But shoppers hover and hesitate. Some glance at the logo, frown, and keep walking. Others pick up a package, check the price, check the ingredients, ingredients, check the recalls in their mind, and put it right back. Tyson hasn't just lost customers, it's lost confidence. The one thing a meat company cannot afford to lose. The collapse didn't happen because Tyson disappeared from shelves. It happened because Americans no longer trust what's inside the package. Between price spikes, contamination scares, labor scandals, and recalls that feel like seasonal events, Tyson became the symbol of everything fragile about America's food supply. A brand so big it seemed invincible, until 2026 exposed how quickly trust can evaporate when families feel unsafe and overcharged. Prices exploded first. Chicken, once the budget meat, became a luxury. A family-sized tray of Tyson chicken breasts now costs what steak used to. Frozen nuggets, the survival food of parents everywhere, jumped to ridiculous levels, and Americans did the math. Why pay premium prices for a brand that keeps ending up in recall headlines? Because that's the other half of Tyson's collapse. The quality questions that won't go away. Listeria contamination, metal fragments, undercooked products, mystery foreign materials, worker abuse allegations, factory outbreaks, supply chain shortcuts. Each scandal chipped away at the public's tolerance until customers simply stopped giving the brand second chances. And then the competitors rose. Store brands improved. Costco's rotisserie chicken became a religion. Smaller producers leveraged clean, local, ethical, and hormone-free marketing. Some families went plant-based out of principle, others out of fear, and many simply out of financial desperation. Tyson's model, industrial, massive, centralized, suddenly looked brittle in an era when Americans want transparency and affordability, and Tyson offers neither. Inside grocery stores, Tyson products now sit longer. Rotation slows. Discounts appear more often. Managers quietly shrink shelf space. You can feel the shift happening in real time. People aren't protesting Tyson. They're simply opting out because trust, once broken, doesn't come back with a coupon. And Tyson's entire empire was built on the assumption that Americans would always need cheap protein and never ask too many questions. But 2026 shattered that assumption. Now meat is expensive, shoppers are skeptical, and families are choosing alternatives that feel safer, cheaper, or both. Tyson isn't vanishing. It's worse than that. It's becoming irrelevant. The fate no mega brand ever expects, but every mega brand should fear. When a brand controls the market, collapse doesn't look like bankruptcy. It looks like shoppers silently switching products, one meal at a time, until the giant realizes too late that its grip on America's dinner table is gone. Next, Kraft, the comfort food brand losing its grip as inflation kills the middle-class households that once kept it alive. 3. Kraft, the middle-class comfort brand that fell out of reach. Walk through the packaged food aisle in 2026, and the Kraft logo jumps out the way it always has. Bold, familiar, comforting. Mac and cheese boxes stacked in cheery yellow. Kraft singles wrapped in their iconic plastic squares. Lunch meat lined up with that nostalgic blue label. For decades, Kraft was the backbone of the American pantry. The brand that said, no matter how tight things get, you can always afford this. Not anymore. Somewhere between inflation spiraling, corporate greed accelerating, and portion sizes shrinking, Kraft transformed from the every family standby into a symbol of how far the middle class has fallen. The products didn't change very much. The price did. And the moment Kraft's affordability vanished, so did the loyalty that once made it untouchable. Start with the mac and cheese, the one meal every broke college student and overloaded parent relied on. What used to be a $0.50 box now sits closer to $2 or $3. Multiply that across a family and suddenly the cheap meal isn't cheap at all. Even worse, consumers swear the flavor isn't the same. Is it the recipe, the thinner pasta, the powdered cheese stretched a little too far? Or is it the psychological sting of a brand raising prices while offering less? Then there are the Kraft singles, once the default cheese for burgers, sandwiches, and broke households everywhere. Now they taste, as many consumers complain, more like packaging than cheese. Shrinkflation didn't just hit the slices, it hit the formula. They melt faster but taste flatter, like a product designed by accountants instead of cooks. And the deli meats? Families are walking away in droves. Why? Because a pound of Kraft turkey can cost more than a full cooked chicken. Because ingredients lists keep getting longer and stranger. Because customers are tired of paying premium prices for meat that feels processed beyond recognition. But the collapse goes deeper than taste. Kraft's downfall mirrors the collapse of the middle class. For 50 years, Kraft thrived by selling to the families in the middle. The ones who weren't rich, weren't poor, and bought in bulk because they had kids to feed and budgets to manage. But 2026, America no longer has a stable middle. The families who once filled carts with Kraft products are now stretching dollars at Aldi, buying generics, or skipping entire categories of food. You can feel Kraft fading. The boxes don't move as fast. The deli aisle feels colder and quieter. The cheese section looks overstocked because shoppers aren't grabbing yellow slices out of habit anymore. People aren't just buying less Kraft, they're replacing it entirely. Store brands taste the same for half the price. Organic brands feel cleaner. Discount chains undercut Kraft so hard it's not even a competition. Kraft became the victim of its own assumptions. It thought Americans would always buy Kraft singles, always buy Kraft Mac, always buy Kraft deli meat, but loyalty doesn't survive when the price tag stops making sense. Kraft didn't just lose customers, it lost the economic world that made its success possible. And now the aisles are filled with products that once symbolized comfort but now symbolize something else. A country where even the cheapest foods aren't cheap anymore. Next, Nestle frozen meals. The convenience food losing customers because it's no longer convenient and definitely no longer cheap. 4. Nestle frozen meals. The convenience food losing to both price and taste. Open the freezer aisle in 2026, and you'll find the Nestle frozen section looking exactly the same as it did 10 or 20 years ago. Lean cuisine boxes with pastel colors, Stouffer's trays promising home-style comfort, Hot Pockets stacked like edible bricks. But the world around those boxes has changed so drastically that Nestle's once unshakable dominance now feels strangely out of place. The freezer case hums, the packaging gleams under fluorescent lights, yet shoppers walk by with an indifference that would have been unthinkable even 5 years ago. Nestle froze time. America didn't. What killed their frozen empire wasn't one big event. It was the slow, grinding collision of price, taste, and consumer exhaustion. Frozen meals only thrive when they're cheap, simple, and trustworthy. But Nestle stripped all three pillars away and left behind products that feel trapped in a different decade. Start with the price. A single lean cuisine, once the ultimate $2 emergency lunch, now hovers between $4 and $7 depending on the store. At that price, families look at the tray, look at the portion size, look at the calorie count, and realize they could cook a whole meal from scratch for less. Then the portion sizes shrank. Tray meals that used to actually fill you up now look like appetizers for people who gave up hope. Hot Pockets got smaller. Stouffer's lasagnas got thinner. Lean cuisines drifted into diet by accident territory. Customers aren't stupid, they notice when a brand thinks it can slip less food into the same box and pray no one complains. And then there's the taste, or rather the lack of it. Americans have gotten used to better food, better seasoning, better options, better frozen meals from Trader Joe's, Costco, grocery store generics, and regional brands with actual flavor. Nestle's frozen meals taste exactly the same as they did 20 years ago, and that used to be comforting. Now it's a liability. The decline shows inside every freezer case. Products sit longer. Frost collects on the edges. Store brands take over more shelf space. Younger shoppers barely glance at Nestle at all. Older shoppers quietly jump to cheaper alternatives. Behind the scenes, Nestle's frozen division is stuck in a bizarre limbo. It can't raise prices without losing more customers. It can't lower prices because profit margins are already razor thin. It can't reformulate because the nostalgia is the only thing keeping the brands alive. And it can't innovate fast enough to compete with retailers whose private labels now outperform them in taste tests. The frozen meal used to represent convenience, but in 2026, convenience has shifted. People batch cook, people buy air fryers, people meal prep, people grab $5 rotisserie chickens from Costco and stretch them into 3 meals. And with grocery prices now a monthly crisis, nobody wants to gamble on a $6 tray of pasta that tastes like microwaved wallpaper paste. Nestle didn't just lose customers, it lost cultural relevance. Frozen meals are no longer the lifeline of busy households. They're a relic from an era when people trusted big brands more than themselves. The freezer case is still bright, still full, still humming away, but it's humming to a crowd that isn't listening anymore. A lineup of meals waiting for shoppers who don't come back. Next, PepsiCo snacks. The chips and snacks Americans finally abandoned after shrinkflation pushed loyalty past its breaking point. 5. PepsiCo snacks. Chips that got smaller, pricier, and worse walk into the snack aisle in 2026, and you can immediately spot the brands that betrayed their customers. The loudest casualties are PepsiCo's snacks, Doritos, Lay's, Cheetos, Fritos, the neon-colored, flavor-dusted icons of American junk food. They still dominate entire sections of the aisle with giant bags and bold logos, but something feels different now. Customers walk past them with a kind of irritated nostalgia, the same way you'd look at an old friend who suddenly started charging you rent just to hang out. PepsiCo didn't lose shoppers because it changed. It lost them because it refused to stop changing the wrong things. First came the shrinkflation. Bags that once looked full now sag like empty balloons. The weight on the label quietly dropped from 12 ounces to 10 to 9.25. to whatever random fraction of a pound accounting could get away with. Air-to-chip ratio became a meme, then a joke, then a genuine reason people stopped buying. You can't sell half a bag of disappointment for $6 and expect Americans not to revolt. Then came the price hikes. $4.29 for a party size that feeds nobody. $6.99 for Doritos that used to cost $2. $5.49 for Cheetos that now have the structural integrity of packing peanuts. People aren't stupid, they noticed, they got angry, then they simply stopped buying. But the real collapse came from something deeper. The taste changed. Whether it was cheaper oils, different corn blends, new preservatives, or intentional cost cutting, the flavors lost their edge. Doritos taste flatter, Lay's feel greasier, Cheetos crumble instead of crunch. Fritos somehow got saltier and blander at the same time. Even the smell isn't the same. More chemical, less food. When customers say they don't taste like they used to, it's over. No marketing budget can fix that. And while PepsiCo kept shrinking, raising, tweaking, and tinkering, competitors were quietly taking over. All these knockoff chips taste nearly identical for half the price. Costco's store brand snacks win blind taste tests. Small regional brands deliver crunchier chips with cleaner ingredients. Even gas station private labels are stealing loyalty. PepsiCo is learning the same brutal lesson every giant learns right before collapse. Size doesn't guarantee survival, consumers do, and consumers are done. They're done paying luxury prices for chips that taste like cost cutting, done watching their favorite snacks become smaller and sadder every year, done being loyal to companies that treat the snack aisle like a laboratory for how far they can push greed before people tap out. Now the snack aisle feels different. The PepsiCo section still takes up the most space, but it feels hollow, a retail graveyard disguised as dominance. The bags are bright, the shelves are full, but the movement is gone. People bypass Doritos for store brands, Cheetos for local alternatives, Lay's for whatever's cheapest that week. PepsiCo snacks didn't vanish. They became optional, and in an economy like 2026, anything optional is the first thing to die. This is how a titan falls, not with shortages, not with scandal, but with millions of tiny decisions made by shoppers who finally said, enough.